The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 6th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord, beginning at verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, Jesus said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. When they had crossed over and landed at Gennesaret and anchored there, as soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout the whole region and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into the villages, towns, or countryside, they placed the sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all who touched him were healed. This is the gospel of our Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. We're going to start with a question, and you'll see why it all comes together. But how many of you drive a Jeep? How many of you, your car is a Jeep? Yeah, mine's a Jeep. How many of you drive a Ford? A Honda? A Subaru? A Chevy? Okay. How many of you drive a Kia? Ooh, I don't see any hands unless okay, I see one in the back. Come on up here. I don't know about you, but I'm just starting to hear about the Kia and see them out there. They're kind of cute. But if you drive a Kia, and I'm sure this is true about every other car manufacturer, but I saw a report, if you drive a Kia, you can feel pretty safe because they test those Kias like nobody's business. They undergo quite rigorous testing before they're ever put out in the showrooms. They have to go through testing of frequent starting and stopping, prolonged idling, towing 7,000 pounds up steep mountains and down steep mountains, and then they put them out in the blazing sun with the windows up and let them heat up as hot as they can get to see how long it will take the air conditioner to cool the interior. They go through some rigorous testing. And to add to it, this testing is done in Death Valley, California. Death Valley is the hottest, lowest, driest desert in the United States. So what better place to test your Kia than in the Death Valley to see how well it will respond, to be pushed to the limits. The 23rd Psalm, which was written by King David and which I will base my message on today, has a Death Valley experience contained in it also. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The 23rd Psalm may be the most familiar psalm. Many believers have it committed to memory. How many of you memorized and know the 23rd Psalm by heart? Yeah, a lot of believers, church-going, Bible-reading people know the 23rd Psalm by heart. But I'll tell you, even people who don't come to church and don't read the Bible are familiar with the 23rd Psalm. As one gentleman said to me not too long ago, you know, I really like that poem, 23 Palms. No doubt he was familiar with it because he heard it read at a funeral. And often we hear it at funerals because it is an appropriate funeral text. It speaks comfort to the grieving. But if we only think of the 23rd Psalm as a funeral text, then we miss the truth that it's really a psalm about living. It's really a psalm about living. The Lord is my shepherd, the psalmist writes. The Lord is my shepherd. In the ancient days as well as today, a shepherd was a tender and herder of sheep. In the ancient days, shepherd was also a metaphor for the role the king was to play in the lives of his subjects. The problem was, most of the kings were either incompetent or worried more about their own power and their own comfort than to take care of tending or herding or caring for their subjects. So for the psalmist to say, "The Lord is my shepherd," he's saying that he is trusting the Lord, looking to the Lord to act as that shepherd who would guide him, tend him, provide for him all the days of his life. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. The psalmist is saying, as a flock of sheep look to their shepherd to provide everything they need, food, water, shelter, protection, the psalmist is looking to the Lord to provide daily bread, we might call it. Our food, our drink, our shelter, and yes, protection from evil as we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Verse 4, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil," may be the most recognizable verse contained in the 23rd Psalm. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And this is where we see the 23rd Psalm as a psalm of life. Because take note, the psalmist says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." He doesn't say, "Yea, though I walk into the valley of the shadow of death and die there." He doesn't say, "Yea, though I walk into the valley of the shadow of death and spend the rest of my life there." He says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, out the other side." Now, the valley of the shadow of death in Hebrew can be translated a place of deep darkness. Is it coming together for you now? A place of deep darkness. So whether our valley of the shadow of death experience is the end of life on this earth before we leave to go to heaven, where we are brought through the valley into the arms of Jesus, or whether our valley of the shadow of death is one of those many times of deep darkness we all experience in our lives at one time or another. Because the truth is, you cannot make it through this life without facing many times of deep darkness. So the psalmist is saying, the shepherd walks through me, walks with me, will provide for me, will keep me from evil in those dark times. The shepherd will walk with me through those dark times in my life and out the other side, back into the light. This is where the debate comes in. Theologians have long debated whether God causes those dark times, whether God allows those dark times, and if he allows them, why? Why doesn't God just wipe out all pain and suffering? Well, theologians will agree that God does not cause suffering. God is a God of love and compassion. He does not cause suffering. But the question still remains, does he allow it? And if he allows it, why? Let's go back to the shepherd and his flock. A shepherd will take his flock through a valley, through a place of deep darkness, through the valley of the shadow of death, because he knows there's something they will gain there. Sometimes it's good pasture land. Sometimes it's water. Sometimes it's protection for the flock because there's something evil up above. And the flock submits to the leading of the shepherd because they trust him so much. They will go even where they don't want to go because they trust the shepherd. They know the shepherd has their best interest at heart, and so the flock will follow the shepherd through the valley even when they don't want to go there. So is there something we gain when we go through those dark times in our lives? Could God allow us to go through those valley times, those times of deep darkness, because he knows there's something that we need, something we will gain in the valley? It could be a strengthening of faith. Anyone, and my guess is everyone sitting here, has one time or another been through that dark valley, that dark time. And when we came out on the other side, we know that our faith has been strengthened because we can see where the shepherd has walked every step of the way through that valley with us. And our faith is strengthened. Sometimes it's the letting go of a fear that we've long held. You know, when you have to face your fears, you overcome your fears. Could it be that when we go through those dark times, whatever our valley of the shadow of death is, and we face our fears, they no longer hold us hostage? And always when we come out the other side of a valley experience, of a time of deep darkness, we have a testimony. You cannot have a testimony unless you've been tested. So when we come out on the other side, we have our own testimony, our own story. And that story is invaluable to the next person that God brings into our life who is going through their own valley experience. You know, out in the Death Valley, when the Kia cars were being tested, there were reporters. And those reporters were taking notes and taking pictures. They were eyewitnesses to the Kias as they were being tested. They reported back, eyewitness accounts. Nothing is more valuable than that eyewitness account. Much of our faith is solidly based on the eyewitness account of the disciples who saw Christ after his resurrection. That's huge in our faith. It's the foundation of it. And nothing is more valuable to someone else going through a dark valley time than for someone to say, I know what you're going through. I've been there. I've been exactly in the valley that you're going through now, and this is how I got through. This is what I learned. This is what the Good Shepherd did for me. I know he was with me. I couldn't have made it without him. Nothing is more valuable than that testimony to help someone else. And when you're going through the valley, when you're going through a time of deep darkness, to have someone come and say, I know what you're going through. And for them really to understand, because you know they've been where you are. But you can't have that testimony if you're never tested in the valley. Are you going through a Death Valley situation now? Are you in a place of deep darkness? They come in all different shapes and sizes. It could be a crisis in your finances, your marriage, with your children, in another relationship. It could be the dark valley of loneliness or addiction or depression, grief, illness. Are you sitting with someone whose life is ending? Those are dark valley experiences. They are going through the valley of the shadow of death. And in these times, my challenge for the church is go to the Word. Open up the 23rd Psalm and read it. Commit it to memory and read it as a psalm of life. Yea, though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, I will come out on the other side. God will deliver me. My Lord, my shepherd, will deliver me out on the other side into the light. Whether that other side is into the arms of Jesus, or whether it's the other side of whatever trial, whatever dark valley that life has handed you right now. And then be ready, because you can be sure that when you're delivered from the valley, the Lord's going to give you opportunity to share your testimony with somebody who needs to hear that you made it through, because the Lord walked with you. You know, most preschool children, at one time or another, manage to lock themselves in a closet or a room, and they're fearful. And one father talks about the day his son, playing hide-and-go-seek in the house, locked himself by accident in a closet. And it was dark. And the child began to beat on the door and thrash around and scream and cry for his father. And by the time the father got there with the screwdriver in hand, the child was just beside himself. And the father began to speak through the door to his child. "Calm down, son. I'm here. Dad's here. I'm going to get you out. Stop crying. Sit still. Listen to my voice. I'm here. I'm going to get you out. I will get the door open." And as the child settled down and listened to his father's voice, though he couldn't see his father, though he couldn't touch his father, he knew that it was inevitable that his father would bring him out of the darkness and back into the light. The father got the door open, took his child by the hand, and led him out of the closet, out of the dark, and back into the light. "See, son, I was never going to leave you. I love you. I would never give up until I brought you back into the light." Christ is the Good Shepherd who walks with us through the valleys, through the dark times. He goes ahead of us. He walks beside us. He protects us. He provides for us because he loves us. He will bring us out into the light. It is inevitable. He is the Good Shepherd. And this is the good news. Please rise and join together for the hymn of the day, number 4.